So, here's the thing. I'm talking to my husband about what strategic means, and I spent probably 4 minutes too long talking to him about what strategic should mean. Here's what strategic should mean. It should be aligned to business-centric issues, metrics, and outcomes. I don't know if we can hand these slides out to everybody, but if you get a copy of this deck, take this slide and post it in your office. All of the work that you're doing should be defined according to what strategic means. And it really doesn't even matter whether or not strategic is in your business title or not. What will define whether or not you're strategic and whether or not you're taken seriously as a strategic business partner is whether or not what you're working on is business-centric in issues, metrics, and outcomes. I was talking with a colleague about 2 years ago. I was new to the organization, working 7 days a week, 12, 14, 17-hour days some days. And I was sharing with him confidentially some of the concerns that I had. And he listened to me and he nodded his head. And he said, Karen, is your agenda the business's agenda or is it your agenda? And it was very impactful to me. It really stood out to me because what I was working on, I was doing a lot of work and had great intentions. But my agenda was my own. It was my own based on my perspective, from my lens. When you change your agenda to reflect that of the business, you will find that you not only have a strategic title, you become strategic in what you do every single day. I want to tell you a little quick story about my time at TRX. One of the things that I first came into almost 3 years ago now when I joined TRX was we were doing an HR scorecard. How many of you do an HR scorecard within your organization? It takes a lot of time and effort. And it looked wonderful. It had lots of analytics, time to fill, time to hire, all of these things. But we were missing some key metrics. And those metrics were designed around where we were failing. Time to fill, time to hire, all of which are very, very important from an HR perspective, but the business perspective was not using that data. So I literally went back to the business and I sent some quick emails and I said, yeah, I report on this every week and then once a quarter to the board, but how many of you are actually using this data? Do you know how many of them responded, I'm not? Every one of them. You know what we did? We stopped reporting on time to fill and time to hire. Here's a quote that I saw recently that I thought really drove this home from a C-suite client of a consultant. He says, I don't need HR surveys to tell me that engagement sucks. I want to know what we can do about it. So be thinking about that. Am I just reporting for reporting's sake, or am I taking some high-level analyses that I've gleaned and then giving them solutions? The business is hungry for solutions. Here's what strategic HR looks and feels like. Recommendations, analysis, and insights are based on business-centric data, not just HR data. Initiatives are quantifiably tied to outcomes that matter to the balance sheet. How many of you are looking at the balance sheet? You know, it's very easy in the HR profession to get siloed, right? We get accused of that a lot. We think about what we're doing based on the HR world, but we really need to be looking at what we're doing and to tie it in quantifiable ways to things like finance, IT, operations, software development, and so on. Strategic HR is versed not only in the HR function, but in our industry, in our organization, in the competitive landscape issues, in our leadership. How many of you really, really know about your industries? It's not enough to be able to quote whatever's on the front of your website. It's important to be able to gain depth. And when you do that in ways that matter, I think you'll really begin to see that there's a turn in how you're engaged. You're not just asked to report on basic metrics. You're asked for insights in environments like this, but also when you go back home to your individual organizations. Strategic HR is accountable at the same standard. One of the things that frustrates me as I talk to HR leaders and practitioners is that they become frustrated when they're really challenged to provide the same metrics, the same level of standards as the other functions. Listen, that's the opportunity that we have to engage with the business at the same level, at that C-suite level. And then strategic HR interacts with stakeholders courageously. So recently I had a conversation with one of our IT leaders who was very, very frustrated, and my team could not get his attention. No matter what we did in the way of reaching out to him, we'd invite him to lunch and all of those things. And so finally I cornered him, and I invited him into a conference room, and I said, I'd really like to understand how things are going for you in the area of talent acquisition, talent management for your team. And what he told me was very, very interesting. He said, I'm frustrated because I feel like the person that I'm working with is stuck in process. What do you mean by that? Well, I'm quoted policy, I'm told these are the things that we've always done, but I really want to stretch beyond that. I want to do some different things, and they're not willing to work with me because it doesn't fit in our current model. I thanked him for his feedback, and I went back to my team, and we did kind of a war room session where literally we got in a room, rolled up our sleeves, and we mapped out every leader that we were accountable for in this particular division. And we talked about what that leader looked like. How does that person normally act? What are their biggest challenges? And how can we respond to them, not in an HR way, but in a way that matters to them, in a way that would resonate with them? A few months later, this manager came back and gave me some astounding feedback. And he says, I want your team in our next team meeting. That's the kind of difference that we can make if we're asking the right questions in the right way and interacting with our stakeholders courageously.